Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Dallas Cowboys season is officially over. The loss to the San Francisco 49ers in the Divisional Round of the NFL playoffs is where the season will be laid to rest. Now, if you want to go see my reaction to that game, you can go to the live stream. It's about 30 minutes long. You're more than happy to go view that. But in today's video, we're talking about the entire 2022 season as a whole and what happened in it, what were the downfalls of the Cowboys this year, what were the pros from this year, and what can the Cowboys do next season to ultimately get to where they want to go, or can they get into the position nonetheless? So, with that being said, let's dive straight into it. Now look, before we get started, context is going to be key when having a discussion about this entire Cowboys season of 2022. That's regular season and postseason as well. So we need to go through the expectations that we had coming into the year, then how the season went, and then what do we have to do to improve upon it, okay? So let's start off with the expectations. If anybody was telling you the Cowboys were going to win the Super Bowl, they're lying to you. I didn't see anybody predicting the Cowboys to win the Super Bowl. I didn't see anybody giving the Cowboys a chance to go all the way. I myself said I did not see the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl this year. And they did not. Not saying that that justifies any shortcomings or anything like that, but that was the expectation. Okay, the Cowboys are not going to win the Super Bowl. So what are the Cowboys going to do ultimately? Well, it felt like everybody was in agreement that, okay, this team is good enough to get into the postseason, but can they win more than one playoff game? Well, everyone thought they would either be one and done again or they might win a playoff game. That was my personal opinion. And I talked about that in my final regular season predictions. I felt that the Dallas Cowboys were a team that can win 10 to 11 games and get into the postseason and maybe win one playoff game depending on the matchup. And that's exactly what happened. The Dallas Cowboys won 12 games, more than what I thought. They got into the postseason, which I thought they would. And depending on the matchup, which they got a favorable matchup in the wild card round, they won a playoff game. So they did meet the expectations that I thought this team would do. And I said it numerous times, even in the discussions before the postseason. I didn't think the Cowboys were winning the Super Bowl this year. And they didn't. Now, that doesn't give them an excuse not to play well in a playoff game. That doesn't give them an excuse to have any shortcomings. But I'm just being honest with you. I did not think the Cowboys were going all the way this year. Now, with that being said, what were other things that were talked about in the beforehand part of the season, right? Well, we thought the front office didn't do anything, right? Hey, they got rid of weapons for Dak Prescott. Hey, they went bargain basement shopping again. They relied on a draft that many people didn't think would do well. That was the conversations we were having. Oh, is Mike McCarthy getting set up so we can hire Sean Payton? Are they doing something else to sabotage X, Y, and Z? And we talked about it on this channel. And I said, well, it feels like it, but at the end of the day, we're going to see how the season goes ultimately. And you know what ended up happening? Now we get into the regular season. So we had our expectations and we had our discussions of what was going to happen. We felt like the Joneses were trying to purposefully sour the team so that they can get rid of McCarthy or move on from certain individuals, right? Next, we have to have a conversation about the regular season and the roster you constructed as an organization. So you have Dak Prescott as your starting quarterback. Then you go to your running back core, which you have Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott mostly with Malik Davis on the back end there. Your wide receiving core, you had CeeDee Lamb. Then you had a Michael Gallup who was recovering from injury. You had Noah Brown, Semi Fehoko. Then you had Dennis frickin' Houston on there. You added T.Y. Hilton on later because you needed help with your wide receiving core. And, I mean, Jalen Tolbert didn't even touch the field, and when he did, it wasn't good. So, you didn't have a good wide receiving core this year. I'm sorry, guys. That's just the truth of the matter. When you look at that back then, it still wasn't good, and it doesn't even look good now. And we'll talk about that in detail, what the Cowboys have to do after this season. But I just wanted to detail that for you. Your tight end position, you had Dalton Schultz, and you had the rookies in Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot. Then you look at your defense, and the defense was pretty much the same group as last year, minus a handful of guys like Randy Gregory leaving. You had DeMonte Casey leaving. I think also Keanu Neal left as well. And then you look at what you brought in. You brought in a couple of guys, but that pretty much was it. Otherwise, you brought back same guys, and there really wasn't much change in that part of your team. Special teams wise, you brought in a guy in Cavante Turpin as a special teams expert. You brought in Brett Maher to be your new kicker. Then you added back Brian Anger as your punter. So that's kind of where it was at with your team, right? You pretty much brought back the same team defensively. You brought in a new kicker. You brought back the punter. Then on offense, you got rid of Amari Cooper. You had a guy in Michael Gallup who was recovering. Yes, you brought in guys like James Washington and stuff, but it really felt like you downgraded offensively compared to last year. So with that being said, how did the regular season transpire? Well, here's what happened. You went 12-5 somehow with this roster. Now, the reason I say it like that is because think about it this way. With how the regular season went, you lost your starting quarterback for 5 games. You lost your starting left tackle for a decent chunk of the season. You had injuries take place along the way. You had things that happened during the season that were not injuries that also, if I told you these things happened, you would think that the season went completely terribly, right? So let's talk about that. So you had your quarterback tie for the league in interceptions with 15, and not all those interceptions were his fault. If you take a look at the film, I did a discussion about that before he started throwing more, and I would say about half of them, of the 15, weren't his fault. A lot of it had to deal with the fact that your receiver did something dumb. They bobbled it in the air. And in fact, that was one of the reasons you lost the game on a pick six, because someone couldn't catch the ball, which would have gotten you a first down. And you know who I'm talking about, Noah Brown in that Jacksonville game. And, when you have these interceptions take place, they take away the amount of possessions that you can have. They can also lead to points, which had happened this season, and cost you some games. And going to the wide receiving core conversation, that also cost you. Because your team couldn't get separation outside of CeeDee Lamb doing his thing and him walking through the door, which is a positive. CeeDee Lamb became an all-pro wide receiver in year 3, and that's what we needed to see. But Michael Gallup coming back from the injury, that didn't help you. He didn't walk through the door that you were expecting when he came back from injury. And it didn't help the Cowboys offensively, which, again, we can get into the play calling, which I'm going to wait till the very end to get to that. But when you look at your roster, you moving on from Amari Cooper and considering what he could have maybe done and what he did in Cleveland, he could have definitely helped you here. You needed a viable number 2 option. And I'm sorry, Noah Brown is not a viable number 2 option in this league, nor is it Simi Fehoko, nor is it Dennis Houston. And Michael Gallup, he didn't look like that this year. And it's 1 year, I get that, and he's recovering, but we need to have, if you're going to have conversations about certain guys, like I've been seeing people have conversations about Dak, you need to have conversations about Michael Gallup too, right? You gave that guy the money and people were talking about like, oh, I'm glad he's coming back, but then he didn't perform well. So if you want to talk about Dak not performing well, okay, that's fine, but... And I understand that he was recovering from the injury and there was a lot going on there with him being rushed back and how quickly he heals. I mean, the Cowboys organization did that to themselves. You didn't have a very good number 2 option that could be reliable. Yeah, you had CeeDee Lamb. He walked through the door as a number 1. That's cool. But you didn't have anybody to be a legitimate, consistent number 2 option. And that is one big factor of what killed the Cowboys this year. This led to not having any guys get separation, so you're forcing your quarterback to throw it into tight windows or try to fit the ball into certain areas that only the receiver can get it. So you made your offense way more difficult to operate than it needed to be because you did nothing seriously to address that. You go to the tight ends, you had Dalton Schultz, and he got franchise tag, and I don't think he's going to be back considering what you saw in the limited spurts of Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot. Also, I get it that Dalton Schultz had some, key moments in this season, and I'm not saying the dude's a bum, but with what you were asking him to do and him looking for that payday, I just don't see it here in Dallas. I'm sorry, I don't. And then you look at your offensive line. Now, with your offensive line, Terrence Steele walked through the door before he got hurt, and I would love to have him back. Zach Martin did Zach Martin things. Tyler Biotish was your most improved player on that line, and I loved what I saw from him. So he could, if he can continue to grow, he could be in consideration for getting a second contract. Your left guard, Connor McGovern. He played very well, all things considered. And Tyler Smith, this dude you weren't expecting much from, came in and he held it down as a rookie at left tackle and left guard. You brought in Jason Peters as insurance, and, I liked what I saw from him this year. And he'll grow. Like, the dude is young as hell. He's going to be, 22 next year? I'm telling you, we'll be fine there, and, they'll figure out what they're going to do offensively with the entire situation that is there. Now, on the defensive side of the ball this season, you had one hell of a start defensively, and then it kind of just cruise control towards the tail end. Yes, you had Micah Parsons in consideration for Defensive Player of the Year until the very end. He had 13.5 sacks. You had Dorrance Armstrong do his thing with, I believe, 8.5 sacks. And then you had Trevon Diggs go from the interception master to him being this shutdown guy. And he got a couple interceptions too, which was nice. But then you had DeRon Bland walk through the door. And this guy getting 5 interceptions as a rookie was solid nonetheless. And then you lost Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown to injury, and Anthony Brown's most likely gone unless the Cowboys bring him back on a cheap deal. But even if you bring him back, he won't be healthy until later in the season. Just calling it what it is there. Your safety group played solid, but there were moments where there were miscues. Your linebackers, you saw good stuff with LVE, which I would be more than happy to bring him back if the price is right. Damone Clark as a rookie, you saw a little bit of glimpses there. Anthony Barr just terrible. He wasn't good with what you were asking. And you're going to need to add a couple more linebackers in here. That's just what it is. Jabril Cox, you didn't see much from him there because he wasn't touching the field. And whether it was because of the injury rehab or whatever it was, he was only on special teams. And then Kavontae Turpin didn't get a punt. He had solid yardage in terms of his returns, and he made the Pro Bowl because of it. But no kickoff return, which I'm not saying that's easy to do, but the thing that killed him was because he needs to learn to read the field better. And if you're looking at that, there were a couple times this season, and especially in the San Francisco game, where if he actually continues running one way, he's gone. Like, he has the speed, 110%. But the fact is that he needs to understand how to read the field better when he's going through running through these tackles, because there were numerous times where he had a chance to take it to the house and he didn't because he couldn't see. Like, I'm like, why are you cutting back here when if you cut back this way, you're going to the house? And those are huge moments that you would need from a guy like him. And then Brett Maher, I got to give a shout out to him because this dude came in. I understand he had the stuff that happened in the playoff game, but he was the reason you got to this point, kicking those field goals when they were needed, getting those points on the board. Props to him. And we'll see what happens there. I think he was only brought in on a 1-year deal. We'll see if they bring him back, but that's it. So in terms of your regular season and me trying to do everything all at once, offensively, you took a step back. Defensively, you stayed the same. And then your special teams, albeit your kicker was better, your punter wasn't on that all-pro level this year, but he did his job. And your kick returner, he did his thing. There's no kickoff return for a touchdown. So, with all that being said, what do we have to do moving forward? Well, so your quarterback can't throw as many interceptions, and this is in 2 parts. Number 1, I think you need to give the guy a legitimate number 2 option, and I think we now understand who Dak Prescott is. He's not the force multiplier that a Mahomes is, because he's an alien. I know people talk about Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, but Josh Allen, he didn't really do well towards the tail end of his season. Joe Burrow, that's another guy who's very well, but he has second and third options to go with offensively. So if we're talking about 3 dudes and Dak Prescott isn't one of them, okay? That's rare to have a guy like that. Very fucking rare, right? So let's just call it what it is. Listen, Dak Prescott just needs more help. There's nothing wrong with admitting that, and I don't want people to make it seem like, oh, you're defending Dak because he played like shit, or you're saying that Dak is trash, because unfortunately you can't have it both ways. Look, Dak Prescott is a good quarterback. He definitely is in that top 10 echelon of quarterbacks. Is he going to be that dude that can make anything happen? Fortunately, no. That's okay, because that's exactly what Tony Romo was. And you could win with that. You can definitely win with that. We've seen that. Okay? But the Cowboys organization has to do a better job at putting weapons around their quarterback, or putting their quarterback in better positions, a la the coaching staff. That's just the truth of the matter. You can't tell me with a straight face that giving a quarterback CeeDee Lamb and then whatever Michael Gallup was this year, Noah Brown, Dennis Houston, Sami Fehoko, a bunch of fifth to undrafted guys, you can't tell me that that's a winning formula. Oh, well, Patrick Mahomes is a fucking alien that I don't even think was born on this planet to do what the hell he's doing, even on one foot and all this other stuff. I don't know what to tell you. And yes, Dak Prescott did not have the best season this year, especially in the postseason in that final game versus the 49ers, right? But again, when you go back and look at the tape, did he make wrong reads in the game? Yeah. But like Michael Gallup, why are you stopping in the middle of your route to allow a DB to walk right past you and lead to an interception? Oh, well, he didn't know the ball was going his way. It doesn't matter. You do not let a DB walk past you at any point in time, because shit like that can happen and it can lead to points, which it luckily only led to 3 points. But still, nonetheless, those are crucial points in a playoff game. Then, of course, you have moments where no one else was targeted. Like, Kellen, what are we doing here? Like, why is no one else being targeted? Do you not have faith in them? Do they not have separation? Which, when you look at the film, really only T.Y. Hilton was the only other guy getting separation. And yeah, Dak made a bad read on a third down. He went to Lamb because the rush was there. But if he looks left, got a wide open touchdown to T.Y. Hilton. So that's a missed opportunity there, right? So now, moving on from that, because I want to get to this big conversation that's being had. Hey, we need to move on from Dak Prescott. 80% of the fan base wants it to happen. A lot of content creators are like, we need to move on from it. Because look what Philadelphia did. Yeah, they moved on from Carson Wentz and they got Jalen Hurts. And they somehow managed to get back to the NFC Championship game, right? Because they're a good team. So I want you to think about this, right? Because I don't think people understand what type of front office Philadelphia has and what type of front office we have. Philadelphia has a GM that's not afraid to take risks and go get players in free agency and go trade draft capital for better players to bolster your room of wide receivers. Like when they got A.J. Brown, when you already drafted a receiver last year in Devontae Smith and all this other stuff. Like, I think that a lot of that has to deal with the fact that you have a front office that's willing to chase that and not get complacent. Here in Dallas, they don't need to worry about getting fired. On top of that, they don't spend a lot of money in free agency. They rarely make big trades to improve their roster. And on top of that, what exactly do you expect them to do, right? Like, they're not going to do anything even when they have a rookie quarterback with a contract that isn't going to take up a large chunk of their cap, right? So, with that being said, let's have a realistic conversation. Let's say the Cowboys can magically waive Dak Prescott's no-trade clause. Let's say that we can magically move on from him with no cap limitations whatsoever in 2023, right? Well, are you going to go out and go get Lamar Jackson? Oh, no, you don't want to pay that kind of money for Lamar? Okay, that's fine. Oh, you want to go get Derek Carr? Oh, I don't like Derek Carr. He doesn't play well. Oh, do you want to go get Jimmy Garoppolo? Oh, no, he's not good. Okay, that's cool. So let's go to the draft. Okay. You have the 26th pick in the draft. Are there any quarterbacks that suit your fancy? I'm going to be doing scouting reports on quarterbacks this year, and I'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, I don't expect the Cowboys to move up to take a quarterback. I would be shocked if they did that. But even if they do take a quarterback, we're talking about a front office that can't evaluate quarterback talent worth for shit. Oh, you don't know that Space Cowboy? Oh, I don't know that. Let's talk about the entire first round possibilities they had since Romo to now. Okay, so they nearly went with Johnny Manziel back in 2014. You fast forward to 2016, they were looking at Carson Wentz in the first round along with Jared Goff. Okay, and if you think those guys aren't good, then okay. Then you move on to the 2021. Yeah, 2021 was the next season draft that we had a conversation about us taking quarterback. You had Mac Jones and Zach Wilson in the conversation. Oh, and I forgot in 2016, Paxton Lynch was the only other time they tried to legitimately trade up and get a guy. Not really a good track record there. Really, the best quarterback out of that bunch is Jared Goff, and even Jared Goff is decent at best. Like, he's in that middle pack tier of quarterback. And that's who you trust to evaluate quarterback talent. The only way that I'm legitimately considering this is if the Cowboys get the number 1 overall pick and they manage to luck into getting whoever's that guy. That's the only way that you can legitimize that. But even after that, what happens after you get the new quarterback? Is this front office going to go and spend money in free agency to build up a team with all that cap space? Oh, you don't think that? Oh, are they going to go and get trades and stuff like that to get their roster better to help that young quarterback? No. Then nothing's going to change, guys. Stop using Philadelphia as a reasoning for us moving on from Dak because you know this front office isn't going to do what Philadelphia does. I'm sick and tired of people trying to put Fantasyland in there and be like, hey, well, Space Cowboy, we can just do what this team did. Because that's not how this team operates. I'm not a fan of it. I talked about why I don't like how this team operates. But that's the truth of the matter. That doesn't mean that Dak Prescott is excused from poor play or you don't bring him back because of that. I'm letting you guys know beforehand that if you try to move on, do you trust this team to really make the good decisions to help the young quarterback out and actually pick the correct young quarterback and then build on top of that? If the answer is no, then you are not getting a team that knows what the hell they're doing. I'm sorry. That's the truth. What 2023 should be is you adding pieces to a roster that made it to the divisional round and actually went toe-to-toe with a legitimate contender this year in San Francisco. Get better wide receivers. Add some more pieces to the defense. I don't know what to tell you. Get another offensive lineman. Who knows? You need to add more pieces to this team with where we're at. That's the end of that. In terms of the coaching staff, Kellen Moore, I hope he's gone. I hope Doug Newsomeier's gone. You need to churn some of these coaches. That I agree with there. Dan Quinn's probably gone, so you need to be ready to make replacements and adequate replacements. And if they don't do that, then you are not going to get to where you want to go. That's just how it works, guys. I'm sorry. That's why you've had this ineptitude for as long as it's been, regardless of the quarterback, regardless of the coach. If the front office is not willing to do their part, then nothing else matters. That's just the truth. And I don't have to say much more on that. And with that, that concludes the 2022-2023 Dallas Cowboys season review and what we can do into next year. So with that being said, we'll have a video detailing what I want the Cowboys to do going into 2023, and then we'll start getting into the scouting reports and then all that other stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I can't wait to see you guys in these later videos, and have a good one.